Hello everyone, welcome to From Combat Boots to Business Suits, the very first episode of the Employer Edit. The purpose of this mini-series is to take a deep dive into some of Scotland's top ex-military employers, and I am delighted today to be here with Andy Mackay, who works for the NHS, and we are going to be getting into how you could potentially start your next career with the NHS after resettlement. So Andy, welcome.
Thank you. Kind of feel like I should be wearing a suit now. The business suit's going. But
That's true. Well, normally when I do my other podcast episodes, we always end the episode with, which do you feel most comfortable with, combat boots or business suits? What would come to mind?
Combat boots are comfortable, but there is no chance I'd fit in my combats now. So I think I'd have to go with the suit option because it's the only one that would fit.
Fair enough. So I was really interested in your story because you have a cracking job. We're actually here on site in St John's Hospital. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm the site director for St John's Hospital and the Princess Alexandra Eye Pavilion. In reality, that means I'm the hospital director. So I run the kind of operational side of the hospital here, as well as the eye hospital in Edinburgh. I've also got a couple of other things that sit into my job profile as well. I run endoscopy services across Lothian and the dermatology service as well.
Wow. So I can imagine for people listening, they're going to go, that sounds crazy. How do you go from your military career to doing this? So let's just kind of rewind it back to the start of your story. Would you mind giving us a wee brief overview of why you joined the forces, where a little overview of your career, and then moving into your resettlement?
Okay, yeah. So I've done a few things. I studied engineering at university. So I went to Heriot-Watt University and did electrical and electronic engineering. Through my time at uni, I really enjoyed it, but I realised that I didn't want to work in a laboratory after uni, like a number of my friends did. So I looked at different career opportunities. I have no military background in my family at all, and I decided to join the Officer Training Corps, so UOTC. So I did a year with Edinburgh UOTC, thought, yeah, I think I kind of like this, but still wasn't convinced. So I did, at the time, what was called a UGAP commission, which was essentially a year of industrial placement, but with the army. Whilst I was still at university. Did that with 3 Battalion Remi in Germany. Really enjoyed that, decided, I want to do this full time. So graduated and went to Sandhurst. So went to Sandhurst proper in 2005. I spent about 10 years as an officer in the Remi. Most of my time kind of based in Germany. Number of different roles. A lot of time skiing, a lot of time doing biathlon.
Nice.
And my final job in the army was as EME for Scots DG. So I was commanded the Light Aid Detachment supporting the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards out in Germany. Unfortunately, I got injured on Herrick 14. That led to medical retirement, so I had about a year and a half under the care of the Personnel Recovery Unit in Edinburgh. So I knew through my transition journey that unfortunately my military career was going to end. I had about a year and a half to think about what to do next. Through that kind of transition journey, I actually used the Officers Association to help me with that. I helped kind of narrow my focus down that I wanted to be in Edinburgh, and so explored financial services as a potential career opportunity. I did an internship with the Bank of New York Mellon, which was quite interesting, insightful first step into the kind of corporate world, and ultimately through connections that I'd made through the OAS, managed to get a job interview with PricewaterhouseCoopers for what they call resource management, which is essentially working with a business to maximise their profitability and how they deploy people. I worked with PwC in Scotland for, I think, 3 years, just over 3 years, and then had an opportunity with the firm to move to Canada. I moved to Canada and headed up the resource management practice nationally for PwC Canada for a number of years. So we lived in Toronto. Had my first child out there, or I say I did, and that changed perspective on things and realised we wanted to be closer to family. For what I did with the firm, there was opportunity in London, had no desire to be in London, so we decided to move back to Scotland, and I looked for a different career path. Saw opportunity to come into the NHS with NHS Fife, and things kind of fell into place from there.
Okay, so let's talk about the NHS now. More specifically, this is not your first job with the NHS, no?
No, this is my second. So my initial job with the NHS was as Deputy Chief Operating Officer in NHS Fife. Mm-hmm. The structure in the NHS is unique. It's different to everywhere else, but I guess the way you could describe it is I would be for acute services in Fife, which is like the main hospitals, it's the punchy end of the NHS, if you like. I was the second in command. That's the easiest way to describe it in military terms.
That's even the easiest way to describe it so that I can understand it, if I'm being honest. Okay, so let's talk about when you were kind of getting into the application process, because I have seen through getting in touch with the Armed Forces Talent Programme and everything, I've kind of seen, I've actually myself, but that's a whole other conversation for another day, I did fill out an application to be on the system to apply for jobs within the NHS into that sort of central hub that you put your account into. Is that how you applied, or was it through networking? Was it a bit of both? What was your onboarding, what was your application process like?
So I think at the time when I was moving back, I probably saw the opportunity through something like Indeed.
Right.
Or some other kind of jobs forum, because I wasn't looking for the NHS specifically. I was looking for director of operations, a chief operating officer type role in probably, like, if I'm honest, at that time probably in a kind of medium-sized enterprise. That was my goal.
Yeah.
A lot of what I'd done with PwC was how to manage complex large businesses, so that kind of fitted with what I wanted. I saw the opportunity for NHS Fife when I read through the job spec. I did what any military person does. I read through it, I went, I can do that. And I think within that it said, for informal inquiries, this is the hiring manager, reach out to them. So I emailed the hiring manager and said, look, here's my experience, that explained a little bit of my story. Ellen, who was the hiring manager, kind of was really good, came back to me straight away and said, I'm really interested to know more. She had previously worked with individuals from a professional services background, and her chief executive, who I think she worked with Hull NHS Trust at the time, was a veteran, was an army veteran. Okay. So had a discussion with her, kind of to understand a little bit more about the role, talk a little bit about kind of my skill set. And so through that discussion, Ellen said, I would love for you to chat with Chris, who's my CO, just to talk a little bit more. So I had an informal discussion with him. He had, I think, I wanted to say he'd done 5 or 6 years as an infantry officer. So that was fantastic, because that was me learning a little bit more about the NHS, because I was still trying to explore, was this a role I was interested in, and also a little bit of him understanding my skills and being able to translate that across to Ellen, who was the hiring manager, and so really that kicked things off as validation from somebody else to say, this guy's probably got the skills you're looking for. Would be something a bit different, and proceed forward to interview. I think Ellen was extremely experienced as a chief operating officer. She'd done a number of senior roles down south, so she was happy that she could take a chance on somebody to build up that NHS experience. So she was more keen, and I was bringing a different skill set to some of the other candidates.
That is almost a perfect sort of scenario, a perfect concoction for getting you in the door, and getting you in the door at an appropriate level as well for your skill set, for your experience. So I want to talk about it from the NHS's point of view, because obviously with the Officers Association and with the sister podcast, it's all about, we're constantly telling the veterans and service leavers themselves, this is how your transferable skills can work in organisations. This is how you should be going through the application process. You know, we're always looking at it from their point of view of how they can best present themselves. But what I find really interesting about your story is that you had a really good set of circumstances that meant that somebody was able to see your CV land in front of them and understand how you can be useful despite not having had direct experience in the field or within the NHS itself.
Yeah.
What would you say to hiring managers within your own organisation that's getting that service leaver or veteran CV? Why do you think they should take that same chance that Ellen did on you?
I think my advice for other hiring managers in the NHS is when people kind of reach out and they've got a different background, don't dismiss them straight away. Reach out to colleagues across the NHS, reach out to me, reach out to plenty of others. There is a huge network across the NHS of veterans, reservists, people that come from military families, regular military personnel. There are a number of people that can translate what that experience and skill set is from a military leaver into what would be beneficial for us as an organisation. I think that's also really important in helping candidates pitch at the right level.
Yes.
I've had experience in the past coaching military leavers into the NHS, and often I find that people will pitch themselves at too low a level, either because they struggle to understand the context of the job spec, or they think that they shouldn't oversell themselves. The challenge is with any large organisation, once you arrive into the organisation at a level, you'll be pigeonholed at that level.
Yes, yeah.
And it's much harder then to jump back to perhaps where your skill set should be.
Yeah, so there's going to be, it's about a little bit of to and froing between the hiring manager and the candidate then, you know. I think
that's important, because then if the hiring manager is not sure, and you will get lots who have absolutely no idea what somebody has to offer, they'll go and seek out and try and find somebody to validate their opinion. I mean, that's what happened with me. That informal reach out with the hiring manager, they spoke to their boss at the time, but somebody they knew well, to say, I've got this person, do I have a chat with them and understand whether it's relevant? That's what I think unlocked the door to then get to an interview. Once you've got to an interview, then it's on you to demonstrate where you add value compared to another candidate. But I think it's using informal connections to try and get that interview is the tricky bit.
Absolutely. And again, what was prevalent in your story and what's prevalent in stories that we hear over and over again with 6 people who have been successful is, of course, the person that hired you had worked with someone who was ex-military. And I guess something for those hiring managers that have never done that is that actually people that have worked with ex-military want to continue to work with ex-military. So it seems in my mind as well like the NHS and ex-service personnel are like a match made in heaven, really.
Definitely. I mean, we have a setup here at St John's Hospital that we call a NAFI break, where the first Wednesday of every month, those from the Armed Forces community come together.
Had a very nice cup of coffee at the last NAFI break.
And that's an opportunity for us to support each other as a team, have banter that you would have had in a military setting that perhaps wouldn't be normal in either the NHS or corporate worlds, but is a safe space for us. But it's also a way that we can build on those informal connections. So we have links with the Armed Forces Talent Programme, who will help individuals transition into military, but we also kind of support each other as an armed forces team as well. And we've got examples locally where perhaps service leavers have come into the organisation, pitched themselves at the wrong level and the wrong job, and we've spotted where they've got skills that could be used elsewhere, and we've got individual stories where people have moved within the organisation and used the skills that they've got. So I think the Armed Forces Talent Programme will give that route in to us to help match people up with informal conversations. and then also allows us to then speak to hiring managers and provide advice or guidance as needed as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, Andy, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know that you're extremely busy. You don't become the site director, you've got time to spare, and I know I'm taking up over lunchtime as well, so I do really appreciate it. Yeah. What I would just like is just a very brief overview of your job that you do now. Yeah. What you find really interesting about it, what you find challenging about it, because I think your story in particular, I think, would pique the interest of quite a lot of our clients, and just be interested in what it is you do day to day.
It's a good question. I do a bit of everything. I suppose fundamentally my role is about leading others. I think in a military context, you probably relate it to a commanding officer or a regiment, probably a slightly larger organisation than that, but in that kind of context. So in my direct line management responsibility, there's about 1,500 people, there's about 3,000 people work at the site as a whole, and so my day-to-day really is about the operational delivery of clinical services. So that could be focused around meeting access targets for unscheduled care, so the number of people that are waiting more than 4 hours in our emergency department to be treated. It could be how we deliver against waiting times and how I manage my surgical services to deliver against that. Or it could be around the facilities and infrastructure here themselves. So this morning I was meeting with our estates team because we need to do some work to our high voltage system. That's going to require an electrical shutdown, so how do I plan for delivering clinical services without electricity as we switch to backup generators? There's a bit of everything every day. At the moment, last week we were spending time thinking about master planning. So what is the master plan for the hospital site over the next kind of 3-5 years? What are the large bits of capital expenditure we need to do? So we need to replace the roof next year. I need to replace some of the lifts. We need to do some work on our ventilation system. A lot of that work. I also spend a lot of time thinking about our resilience planning. Work very closely with our resilience team on how do we deal with scenarios that are the ordinary. What happens if there's a major incident nearby? We're in an area of heavy industry in West Lothian. What happens if there's a major explosion somewhere? How do we deal with the mass casualties that may come from that? How do we make sure we've got the resources and plans to hand to be able to deal with that? So I would say my job varies every day depending on what's happening. That's probably what I enjoy most about my job. That and leading people. Leading people, kind of I mentioned earlier, is a skill that's perhaps underinvested in outside of the military. So I spend a huge amount of time engaging with staff, understanding what I can do to make their life at work better, and what I can do to try and lead them to get the most out of them as well. So yeah, a big part of it is just being out, being a visible leader, and enjoying that. And
interestingly, a lot of businesses will spend a lot of money to have people come in to train those skills, whereas people like you are coming in, as you've said, that is so heavily invested in. It's all just inbuilt and ready to go.
Absolutely. Anyone that's coming out as a military officer, I guarantee they've had more leadership training than anyone in any organisation that they're going into, by virtue of the roles that they do. Even if you've just done a year at Sandhurst or Cranwell or whatever the naval equivalent is, I can't remember. You'll have done Britannia, I think it is. You'll have done more leadership training than anyone else. So you're just immersed in it all the time, so you don't realise that you're learning as much as you are. But everything you learn through that makes you adaptable to go into any workplace.
Listen, Andy, thank you so much for your
Not
time.
at all.
It's been lovely to speak to you.
Yeah.
I will leave you to the rest of your day. But to anyone who is interested in applying for the NHS, we would urge you to get in touch with the Armed Forces Talent Programme. Come along to an event next week. We are currently filming March 2026, so next Wednesday the 11th, there is an event in Newhake House at the Poppy Factory. Come on over, learn how you could or join the NHS Scotland. And Andy, thank you so much, and we'll speak to you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.